Well, let's talk about investigations. Let's figure out why we do it, what the whole point is, where it came from, kind of get some introductory aspects of it. I will tell you that I know when I went through my introduction briefly, when I went through the orientation for the class and my expectations, I didn't tell you a lot about me. If you had my class, you know a little bit about me, but I will tell you that I do have some investigative experience. I was with the Los Angeles Police Department for 22 years, and many of those years were spent as a detective and a detective supervisor. The bulk of my investigation time was spent investigating sexual assaults. I did a little bit of auto theft before that, but I didn't bounce around to a lot of different subjects or crimes. In the LAPD, we specialize a lot in our investigations. So, like I said, my specialty was sexual assaults for the bulk of that time. With that as an example, I'll pose a question to you guys about investigations and how you would handle investigations. Why? I think we can all agree that confidentiality is important in investigations. But somebody tell me why. What is important about confidentiality in investigations?
Without having confidentiality, the people that are bringing it to you might not bring it to you.
Sure. Yeah. Trust. So trust in the fact that I can share as a survivor of a crime or a victim of a crime, I can share with you very detailed experiences that I've had that are probably negative. Specific to sexual assault, do you think there's some additional confidentiality, if not requirements, than needs, desires? Should sexual assault investigations be held to an even higher confidentiality standard, do you think? What do you think? Yeah? Obviously, that person could be a target. That person's already been victimized once, could be victimized again due to the investigators, I don't know what we call it, neglect, sharing information. So what do you think? What about sexual assault investigation specifically? We'll bounce around to other subjects, but since I brought that up, why should those be held to, or should they be held to a higher standard of confidentiality, and so why?
Yes, because it's a really sensitive subject. Most victims don't like to come out about it, first of all. So when you do get those victims who do want to come out and tell you and talk about it, they want to be able to know that their information is secure and safe with that person.
I think that's a really good word. She said that the nature of the investigation is sensitive, and I'm paraphrasing. But the nature of that investigation is sensitive, and folks may not even want to come out and talk about it in general. And so when they do have the courage, or they've been encouraged to talk about it, betraying that trust that they've given you is huge, not only for the future, but for the investigation itself. But we can transition away from sexual assault investigations and say like a homicide investigation. So a homicide, by the mere definition of homicide, our victim is dead. Our victim cannot be any more embarrassed. They cannot be, their trust by definition can't be betrayed. Obviously there's family to be considered. But that's the difference. You know, we're investigating homicides versus investigating sexual assault, specifically those two. Those are two very heinous crimes, probably two of the most heinous crimes that we as a society, as a people, possess. But one of those, you don't have to necessarily worry about further victimizing that victim. But the other, sexual assault, you're dealing with a heinous crime and the aftermath of that victim. Granted, there's still aftermath for homicide because there's family and survivors and things like that. But that makes sexual assault investigations that much more difficult to conduct because you're dealing with the emotion from the victim as well as the factual aspects of the case and solving the case, clearing that case. So confidentiality when it comes to other investigations outside of sexual assault. So I agree with you in my experience, and I think we would all agree that somebody who survives a heinous incident like a sexual assault, one, doesn't want to talk about it. They may decide to, but it's not going to be high on their to-do list, right? And I want to come back to that in a moment and talk about the whys. But I want to transition away and make it more extreme and we'll talk about a homicide investigation. Why would a homicide investigation require or be desirous of confidentiality? Why is it important? Because we're not embarrassing the victim. They don't care. Sure.
To keep from like copycats or to like, people who just wanna like say that we have a lot of people who just wanna like come out and say that they did it when they did it. And so when the police are doing an investigation, if that person knows certain things, then the investigation can go towards that person because they shouldn't know certain things. And if they do know things that are not public, how do they know that? So if everything is out in the public, it's harder to find that person.
Those are two excellent points. I think you made two individualized but excellent points. One, I'll start with the first thing she said, is that she wanted to avoid, she mentioned avoiding copycats. So you don't want to give out information that may encourage additional crimes to occur. And I think that's excellent. But even better than that is the investigative importance, the significance of the facts of the case that maybe only certain people know. And if somebody does know that and that information has not been released, you're going to at least have some questions. It's not a guarantee. It doesn't mean they did it. There are leaks. But by keeping certain pieces of an investigation confidential in nature, you're preserving the integrity of that case. There have been times when I was investigating certain cases that I did not release certain pieces of information. A lot of my investigations would be released to the media on purpose. I don't mean leaked. Like we would involve the media in our investigations. In fact, as we go through this class, I may show some videos. There's plenty of videos online of investigations that I've been involved with or crimes that I've investigated. And the information, either you'll see me talking to the news media, like I'm talking to a reporter on the news, or information that I've authorized is being released and somebody else is speaking to them about it. But when I did that, do you think I opened up my case file and handed it to the reporter and said, here you go, here's everything we know? No, because I wanted to hold some stuff back. One, because of the first thing we talked about, sexual assault being sensitive nature. I don't necessarily I'm probably not going to reveal even who the victim is. I mean, how dare I? Like you entrusted me with such a heinous crime, and I'm going to go and put your information out there for everybody to see. I may talk about the suspect. I may say, hey, we've got a guy out there who's doing X, Y, and Z to several different people, and this is his pattern. But I may not even tell everything about the pattern because eventually I want to talk to that guy, and if he knows some certain things, like I was saying, that I haven't released, I'm going to have some questions as to how that person knew it. So let's talk about the purpose of investigations. Why we do them. I offer you one option that our job in investigations, regardless of the career field, this is mostly geared towards policing, the law enforcement side of the criminal justice world, but there are investigations at other parts of our wheel of criminal justice. So we have usually we consider there are three aspects of criminal justice. We have corrections, law enforcement, and courts. Each one of those spokes in the wheel has an investigative arm. You may not see it, it may not be as famous, you may not see TV shows about them, but prisons have investigative arms. There are people that conduct investigations to get intelligence to find out what's going inside the prison. Investigating the gang activity inside a prison. There are investigative arms in the corrections spoke. The court arm, is that a hand? Oh, the court arm has investigators. There are DA investigators, district attorney investigators, and defense attorneys have investigators. They're going to help put together a case. So although most times when we talk about investigations and these investigative procedures that we'll be discussing all semester, we will probably be focused a lot on the police and law enforcement, detectives. Just bear in mind that there are other aspects. But let's talk about why we Are we conducting investigations? What I was going to pose to you, one option. Are we conducting investigations merely to put people in jail? Is our whole goal in an investigation to put somebody in jail?
Not always.
No. I see a lot of no's. I think you said no, right? Tell me, why no?
I think, well, at least one of the things is that a lot of times when the goal is just to arrest somebody, that can obviously create a lot of like false arrests or false incriminations to people. But then also it's like, you know, what if you're trying to solve a cold case? The person might not even get life still. So if your goal is to put someone in prison, but your goal should always just be to find the truth. And then whatever needs to happen outside of that, then of course if that's an arrest or if that's who knows what, then that's it.
You're blowing me away. That's an amazing answer. I can't even paraphrase all that. It was great. So she touched on something towards the end of what she said. I feel like my lecture's done. She touched on something right at the end of her lecture that's so key, so significant, and in fact, I would probably write it down. And that is the goal, the primary goal of any investigation is to find the truth. The goal of any investigation is to find the truth. It is not to put somebody in jail. Because I will give you, and then we're going to touch a little bit more about what she said. I will give you this scenario. In my experience, I will let you guess about my experiences and comment on my experience. Back to sexual assault. Every single sexual assault report that I got, did it happen? Did every single report that I got occur? Was everyone truthful? Unfortunately, no. Sometimes, and it's sexual assault, or it could be auto theft, it could be fraud, it could be any crime, but I'm talking, I'm speaking experientially, giving you some practical application from my investigations. There were times where the investigation revealed, a lot of times through admission of the reporting party, the alleged victim, who changed their mind and said, I was lying. Sorry. No, it didn't happen a lot. And does it mean that we don't investigate every allegation seriously until we find out that it didn't occur? I take every single report seriously and treat it as if it occurred until we find out differently. But sometimes, regardless of the crime, people aren't necessarily truthful. So, in that case, in a case of any crime, specifically sexual assault, if my goal was to put somebody in jail, would I be looking for the truth? No, because if I look for the truth, I would have to ignore the truth to put somebody in jail. My goal was to find the truth, to find out what happened, regardless of whether or not somebody goes to jail. And then she brought up a point about cold cases. That's a point that I hadn't even considered. She said the goal in cold cases is also to find the truth, and maybe that person isn't even around to arrest anymore. I have had incidents like that where by the time we got around to investigate the case, the person had died. They weren't necessarily cold cases. Sometimes people die. There's a ton of ways people die. And sometimes they're just not available to be arrested by the time you figure out who did it, or by the time you figure out they have an availability to go arrest them. So in a cold case specifically, you still want to find out the truth. You still want to find out who did it, even if you suspect that the person who did it and the person you're looking at is no longer available to arrest. You want to close that case. Why? Why do we want to close cases where we can't arrest the suspect?
Exposure,
To who?
the family.
Yeah, well, for a homicide, sure, the family, or it could be to the victim. I mean, not every, in theory, not every cold case is a murder. I think most of the ones we hear about because they're so lengthy and are murders. But there can be older. I mean, maybe you don't want to call it a cold case. You can call it an old case. You want to find out the truth, regardless of whether or not they're going to jail, because the family, yeah, that's good. The family of the victim is going to. We owe it to them. As investigators, the people that we work for, in theory, is the public, and we should. If the public is the one that's giving us our report card, then we should strive to give them the best service possible. Let's talk about some of the tools that we've been given. that have been developed. I know we talked about one of the things you hear is like the birth of actual investigations. So we've talked about, and if you've taken any criminal justice classes, you've probably discussed Sir Robert Peel. Sir Robert Peel, commonly known as the father of modern law enforcement, based on a lot of reforms that he wanted to make. He became the leader of the London Metropolitan Police, had a lot of reform ideas that he documented into Peel's principles, and changed the way we did law enforcement in general. But even before Robert Peel, we had an organization called the Bow Street Runners. It was kind of a public, like a neighborhood watch on steroids. But what they did is they took it one step further than the neighborhood watch and just preventing crime. They went out and started looking at crimes that had already occurred. Instead of just being a good neighbor and calling somebody or stopping a burglary in progress, if a burglary occurred, they would try to figure out who did it. Isn't that an investigation? Yeah. So they were the first, one of the first, to actually start doing these investigations. And that's why we trace our roots back as detectives, as investigators. We trace our roots back to the Bow Street Runners. In fact, they were so good at their job that eventually some of them ended up on the payroll. They ended up getting public money as compensation. They were volunteers at first. But I would also make note of that, that organization, the Bow Street Runners, as where we trace our roots back to initial investigations, and obviously things have progressed from there. So I'm going to stop it now because I actually didn't realize we'd gone so far. And I want to give you an opportunity. We're probably not going to work too much on the crime scene in class now, but I want to give at least a chance to answer some questions about it so you can work on it at home, and I want to pull it up and we can discuss it. I just don't think by the time we get in there, or you get in there, we'll be able to do it. So the crime scene lab. If you haven't looked at it, even if you have, that is our crime scene. Our crime scene has a person lying on the floor and several items around them. I believe there's even some blood. No, I'll leave it up for your judgment. I thought I saw some there, but maybe there's some I haven't studied that too. That is a view from what you can see outside. This picture is a view of what you can see from outside this residence. Are you allowed to, in general, go inside somebody else's house and conduct an investigation? In general, no. Lots of exceptions. We're going to use any of those exceptions. Now, how do I get into your house if I want to investigate you? Search warrant is one of them. That's what we're going to use today. Again, some other options, other ways I can get in, but today we're going to talk about search warrants. Search warrants are me telling a judge, I think a crime occurred. Here's why I think a crime occurred. I want to go in there and investigate it, and here's what I think I'm going to find. It's also, here's what I did find. So, what I think I'm going to find is going to be super easy on this case, as opposed to some of the many search warrants that I've been involved with, where it's close. I think there's a crime going on inside a warehouse, and I think I'm going to find this. I can't see inside the warehouse. Here, you're looking through the window. You can tell this judge everything you think you're going to find that's going to help you investigate that case. Made it super easy. There's a window right there. You can tell it. You're able to look. One, I think, can we all agree that it looks like a crime occurred? Or may have occurred? Just real briefly, what makes you think a crime occurred? What's the most obvious thing?
Body.
There's a body. Now, we may investigate it, and we're here to find the truth, not put somebody in jail, and we may investigate it later throughout the semester and realize that there is a crime, but there is a body. That is your assignment. That is the basis of your assignment. What you're going to do is go here to your search warrant. You may need to save this and then start typing on it, as opposed to typing on it directly where the link is. Do whatever it takes for you to save it. Logistically, do what it takes to save it. Fill out. Go back here. Complete the search warrant thoroughly. Include the probable cause to believe a crime has been committed. You're going to give detailed information to the judge why you think that there's a crime, more than just the body. You're going to be thorough about it. Once you give the probable cause to believe that, then you're going to save that search warrant and submit it in the crime scene assignment. Fill out the boxes as much as possible. You're going to identify yourself. You're going to identify the location to be searched. The location is going to be your neighbor's house. You don't have to use your address, use your neighbor's address. That is going to be the location to be searched. This is what you think it's going to reveal. In this case, you're super fortunate because you looked through a window and you were able to decide, and you can keep going back and looking in the window if you want while you're writing this. From there, you're going to inventory everything that was recovered. Detailed inventory, colors, shapes, sizes, brand name, if possible. Save this document. However, it needs to be saved for you to submit it into Blackboard as an assignment. You're going to submit it. Although you access it here, you're going to submit it here. That is your actual assignment. Any questions on that? Yes.
So what would you say we should put like case number and?
I will allow you to make up the case.
Okay.
I'm not going to grade items of information that I haven't given you. I will not penalize you for not having. I gave you a specific address to use, or not a specific address. I gave you an address to find to use your neighbor's house. And I gave you the photograph. So there's a lot of pay close attention to the photograph. There's tons of items that I think would be beneficial to find out what happened in this case. We're not going to find out today what happened in this case, but we're going to recover some items of evidence and start to work this case. I saw a hand here.
Yeah. Can we use like search words on Google? Like
If you want to use exemplars, you have resources at your fingertips to use. Do not copy them, but use them as exemplars by all means. There's also the book. The book's going to tell you how to write. You know what format, not what format, but kind of some verbiage to use. Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question. In like reality, to say like I looked and saw this,
Mm-hmm.
for someone to come in and not have a search warrant, would that be for like, endanger like someone's health? Like say that I see that he's like suffering.
Yes.
Can someone can go in there? Like how does that work?
In reality, if I were not giving you an assignment, there is some basis to believe that this person's life is in danger and they should be saved. You would be allowed to use an exemption to the search warrant called exigency. We're not going to use that for this class because I want you to write a search warrant.
Yeah.
The assignment would be over if you just said, I kicked in the door and I went in and saved us. Or I kicked in the door and he was dead. Next. We're not going to do that today. But yes, to answer your question, if you were to walk by and see somebody on the ground, I've seen this scenario before in my time, and I saw somebody laying there. We kicked in the door and we went in and found out what happened. Now, once they're in there, and if that person is deceased, is there still an emergency? No. Now you need a search warrant. There's no more emergency if they're dead. So we would still. This assignment could have easily said that. You kicked in the door, you went in, the person's deceased, now what? And you would have the same view. I'm not going to use that. It's a window. It's probably not going to change your probable cause. The only thing that's going to change your probable cause is when you tell your story, you're going to say yes, from the outside eye view type of thing. Any other questions? In that case, we are just about out of time. I do. Did you still need to talk about uploading, or do you want to work on it and contact me later? Okay. Then I'm just going to share. If you have any issues uploading that document, make sure the first step I would check with troubleshooting is that you save it to your hard drive, not the cloud. You can also save it to the cloud. I would save to the hard drive and try uploading it from your hard drive as a PDF, because if you go from the cloud, there may be some technology issues with that. If you have any problem uploading before the deadline, please contact me before the deadline so we can discuss. If you contact me at the deadline, it's a little suspect. All right, you guys enjoy the rest of your day.